Talk to me about the UFC, your experience. You're with Bellator now. I had Coker in here.
Yeah.
Coker is a different kind of guy than Dana White.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and tell you what King Mo told me. You know King Mo, right?
Yeah.
And this is the way he told it to me. You can tell me whether you agree with that. He said, Brian, you remember East Coast and West Coast rappers, right? Have you heard this story?
No.
Okay, look at that. He said,
the start already is,
right, you like it already? He said, you had Death Row where you had Suge
Yeah.
Knight and like Dre and Snoop Dogg, right?
Yeah.
And then you had East Coast where you had P. Diddy and Biggie Smalls, right?
Yeah.
And so on the West Coast, Suge Knight was there, but Snoop was in front and and Dre was in front and they were doing all the business. Whereas with Diddy, like B.I.G. was there and the Diddy was always jumping in and saying, hey, and it's me and me. And he said that's Dana White. Dana White is jumping in front of the cameras all the time when it's really the fighter show. And he said Scott Coker's the Suge Knight of MMA. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's a funny one from Mo. But yeah, it shows they are two completely different characters, But I feel, for me personally, I feel Scott Coker is more approachable. I feel like I could send him an email, I can send him a message, I can, give him a phone call. I think the relationship side of things is better with all of his fighters. I don't think they'll feel there's favoritism. I feel like Scott just wants to put on good fights, and if two fighters agree they want to fight, then if it makes sense, then why the hell not? Whereas I think with Dana and the UFC, I think there's favoritism. I think that's the major thing for me, is favoritism. I don't think everyone is treated fairly, and that's probably the main thing. Away from the brash character that Dana is and the sort of subdued character that Coker is, I think for me personally, I feel like I can go to Scott, whereas I never really felt like I could, just go to Dana and say, look, I want to make this happen. I think this would be good for me, or, can you ask this? Could we put this together or something? I never really had that relationship. But I was there for just a short time. Whereas Scott Coker, I fought for him at Strikeforce, and now I'm here with him at Bellator. So we already sort of understand how each other works.
When you first went to the UFC, I know the party line there was the best fighters are here in the UFC. And I think from the very beginning, you kind of said, I fought the best in the world, and they're not all here, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Was that a conscious effort? Because I know not many guys would have said that coming into the UFC.
Yeah. I just felt like, I'm a boxing fan as well as a martial arts fan, and I just was looking at the two sports, and they're the closest sports that, I can compare. And I just thought that, in boxing, not all the best boxers are WBC champions. There's a WBA champion that would whoop a WBC champions, and that's how I thought about MMA. I thought, right, the UFC has some great fighters, but if I put that Pride fighter against that guy at that time in their career, I think the Pride fighter would win. And I'd been fighting these guys. I'd been fighting guys that weren't with the UFC, but were champions elsewhere. And some of them even had wins over current UFC fighters. So I just thought that it just wasn't a fair thing to say that all the best fighters are in the UFC. And I still think that today. Not all the best fighters are in the UFC. I think Douglas Lima is one hell of a fighter, and I think at this point in time, I'd put him against Tyron Woodley, and I'd put money on Lima to beat Woodley.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, learn from the best minds in the world, and connect with a community of passionate people building the best versions of themselves. Just click on the link below, and I'll see you on the inside.